So, I'm sure you've heard of Draw Steel, right? The hot new TTRPG from Matt Colville's MCDM that they're releasing later this very year. Well, if you haven't, don't worry, but stick around because you might have just found your new favorite game. If you have heard about it though, you're probably wondering how to introduce it to your friends. You're excited, you might have even playtested the game on MCDM's Discord server. All that's left is introducing it to your friends. But Draw Steel's not the simplest TTRPG out there, So, how to best introduce it to new people? The good news is, last week I introduced Draw Steel to a bunch of strangers in my friendly local gaming store to great success. And I'm here to share the 10 steps I followed to leave my players wanting just a little more DS in their lives. Of course, my method is not for everyone, but you might just learn something from my experience. All that you're going to do is run a 2 to 3 hour session for your players where the goal is to have fun. That's it. I even made the pre-gen character sheets for you to save you a lot of work. Okay, so let's go. My name is Caillou. This is the Dice Society. Let's draw steel and get started. Okay, let's begin with step number 1, and this is the easiest. Don't push it. We all play TTRPGs to have fun, okay? So don't force your friends to play Draw Steel. The game's still not out yet. It's still in playtest. So if your friends are not in the mood, wait and try again once the core rulebooks are out. With art and layout, everything gets easier. If they do agree to play with you, don't shove a whole campaign down their throats, because you're not going to get very far. Just do this one shot first, and then you can think about next sessions. Apparently, Matt is recording a video pretty soon about how it's not fun to demand that your players play other games. So go watch his video if it's out already. Otherwise, you're done with step 1. Cool? Anyway, on to step number 2. Read the rules. If you don't have the rules yet, this is a good time to go get them. You can either pre-order the game on BackerKit or join MCDM's Patreon for a single month. Either way, you're getting the most recent playtest documents. Once you have those documents, you don't really have to read all of them, You just need to get acquainted with the basics. So stuff like combat, tests, how to run monsters, that kind of stuff is really important. But the rest, like ancestries and classes, your players will be able to do that once they get to the table. There are also plenty of community-made resources out there to help you learn Draw Steel. I'm leaving links down below to a crash course, a cheat sheet, and a video introduction if you need any of those. Anyway, just get acquainted with the rules. If this is your first time running Draw Steel, you're probably going to make some mistakes anyway. And the goal here is to have fun, not develop a whole lot of knowledge about a game that's not even out yet. Now it's time for step number 3, prep. Once you're a little more familiar with the rules, it's time to prep a simple adventure for you to run. My suggestion is that you use Acts 1 and 2 of the Bay of Blackbottom, one of the playtest adventures that came with backer packet number 1. If you want to run your own adventure, I suggest that you start with one scene where a few tests happen and then a second scene with a no-frills encounter. Optionally, you can wrap up the session with a montage test, but that's completely up to you and your players. Just remember to not hit your friends too hard. Use simple enemies to not distract from the combat, like humans or goblins. Once you're done, it's time to get your friends to the table, either physical or virtual. Once they're all in place, hit them with step 4, the pitch. This is the time to talk about what Draw Steel is. The first 3 pages of the manuscript are awesome for this. Talk about the fact that Draw Steel is a heroic and cinematic game, about its differences from D20 Fantasy, and what the game is good and not so good for. But no rules yet. Do not jump the gun. This is also the time to talk about what made you excited for Draw Steel, what made you want to back the game, what made you want to run it. This is, of course, very personal, but for me, for instance, it was Flea Mortals, the monster book. Once you're done pitching the game, it's time to move on to step number 5, the character sheets. For my game, I made some compact character sheets that were already filled out. I used Lord Durok's pregens and then tweaked Mr. Matt Dollar's character sheet toolkit to make what I think is a pretty good introductory experience. Now, let's take a look at what these compact character sheets look like. Each pregen is only 2 pages and contains no extraneous information. The first page is the most important and contains facts about the character on the left side, stats and trackers down the middle, including conditions, and their most important abilities on the right side. The second page contains all other abilities and 3 mini cheat sheets to help your players remember the most important rules. I even made some slight adjustments to avoid confusions, like marking free strikes as free triggered actions, since this is their most common use case. It's all color-coded too, with actions and signature actions in red, maneuvers in blue, and triggered actions in green. If it's free, it gets an F. If it has a cost, it gets a number. Some pregens even get note cards to clarify rules that are especially relevant for them. If you decide to use my compact pregens, you can get them for free from the link in the description. Either way, once you get the character sheets out, it's time to talk a little bit about the classes and ancestries so that your players can express their preferences. But this is also the time to draw your friends in. You can, for instance, talk about how dwarves can grow crystals on their faces, how tacticians can command the battlefield, and how every character comes with an inciting incident. Only now that your players have chosen their characters, I suggest moving on to step number 6, explaining the power roll. This is the core resolution mechanic of Draw Steel, so I suggest that it also be the first rule you're going to talk about. But keep it simple. Right now, I wouldn't even mention combat, just that for tests, you should roll 2d10 and add a characteristic. Also, a skill sometimes. Explain that there are 3 outcome tiers, that there are no DCs like in D20 Fantasy, but do not overdo it. Keep it simple. Just use a few examples, but don't go into a whole dissertation on the qualities of the power roll. And now that they're onboarded, it's time for step 7. Start the adventure. Let your players name their characters and describe them, just so they get in the mood. Then, describe the situation they're in and let them roll a few tests to warm up. Later, you're going to get into combat. If you're running the Bay of Blackbottom, the Voyage Vignettes is perfect for this. Once your players are comfortable with the power roll, spring step 8 on them. Draw Steel. Start the combat by explaining how rounds work in this game, alternating between director and players. Then explain the stuff that every character has, like stamina, recovery, surges, and speed. If the monsters go first, let the players see how a regular turn looks. Once it's the player's turn, grab their attention once more to explain how actions, maneuvers, and triggered actions work. Then go a little bit into the specifics of what each character can do. If you're using the compact character sheet, I suggest going through the abilities that are on the first page of each character. Once you do this, the players are going to be ready to decide who goes first among them. If you're feeling bold, you can power through on to step number 9, explaining heroic resources. In my playthrough, I waited 2 player turns in order to explain heroic resources, but you can wait more or less depending on how well your players are doing. This was a delicate step for me because it's probably the one that adds the most complexity to the game. At this point, you're going to have to tell your players what their heroic resources are and how to spend them on heroic abilities. This is probably going to prompt your players to look at the second page of their pre-gen character sheets. This is good. This is what you want. They're probably going to ask you about their free strikes and weird class abilities. Good, let them. As the battle goes on, remember them to keep track of their heroic resources, when they're getting it, when they're spending it, and help them choose what to do with their heroic resource if they ask for help. When the battle is over, wrap up the session and ask how your friends liked it. That's it. This is step number 10. Ask for feedback. It's over. Now, it's up to you. If they all really liked it, you might want to run again. Also, you might not have liked it. That's fine too. No one's forcing anyone to like Draw Steal. Just remember that once the core rulebooks are out, the art and layout are going to help a lot anyone enjoy the game. Anyway, those were my 10 steps on how to introduce your friends to Draw Steal. Just to recap, the steps were: don't push it, read the rules, prep a simple adventure, pitch the game, hand out pregens, explain the power roll, start the adventure, run a single combat, help your players remember their coolest abilities, and ask for feedback. Yep, one take, didn't read it from anywhere. Either way, if you like this type of content, subscribe to the Die Society on YouTube. I also make a pretty cool news podcast about Draw Steal. Also, subscribe to my mailing list and be among the first to know when I finish updating my really cool Draw Steal adventure called You Meet in an Ambush. That's it, everyone. Thank you very much, and goodbye.